You might be becoming a more mature man without actually realising it. Not because you've got more money, not because you're more confident, not because you've suddenly figured life out. Sometimes maturity is much quieter than that. It's when rejection doesn't destroy your confidence anymore. When you can walk away from an argument without needing the last word. When you can spend a Saturday night alone without feeling like something is wrong with you. So in this video, I'm going to give you 10 signs that you're genuinely becoming a more mature man. And some of these, they might surprise you, because maturity, it's not about becoming cold or emotionless. It's about becoming more grounded, more self-aware, and less controlled by things that used to control you. So number one, you don't feel the need to prove yourself anymore. Think about how much of your behaviour used to be influenced by what other people thought. You wanted people to know you were successful. You wanted women to find you attractive. You wanted other men to respect you. You wanted people to know that you were confident, intelligent and capable. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to improve yourself. The problem is when you start living your life like you're constantly being evaluated. You get a new job and immediately want everyone to know. You buy something expensive and feel the urge to show it off. Someone challenges your opinion and suddenly you need to prove that you're right. Someone doesn't seem impressed by you and it bothers you for the rest of that day. But as you mature, something changes. You start realising that you do not have to convince everyone of your value. You can become successful without announcing every achievement. You can become confident without dominating every conversation. You can improve yourself without needing that applause. And you can let someone misunderstand you without desperately trying to correct their opinion. Because your value, it doesn't increase just because somebody else recognises it. And that's a major shift. You stop asking, how do I make them see my worth? And you start asking, am I actually becoming someone I'm proud of? That's a much healthier question. And that leads us to the next sign. Sign number 2, rejection doesn't destroy you anymore. Maybe someone you really liked doesn't feel the same way. Maybe you asked someone out and they said no. Maybe someone you thought was a close friend starts pulling away. Maybe you applied for something you really wanted and you didn't get it. And for a less mature man, rejection can feel like a verdict. I'm not attractive enough. I'm not successful enough. What is wrong with me? But eventually, what you learn something important. Rejection is not always a judgment of your self-worth. Sometimes it's simply information. Sometimes someone can decide that they don't want a relationship with you. That doesn't mean you're undesirable. A company can reject your application. That doesn't mean you're incapable. A friendship can end. That doesn't mean you're impossible to like. And maturity is being able to experience disappointment without turning it into an identity. You can think, that actually really hurt me. I wanted it to work, but it didn't. And then you just keep moving. You don't need to convince someone to choose you. You don't need to chase somebody who has already made that decision for themselves. And you don't need to turn rejection into anger just to protect your ego. A mature man can be disappointed without becoming bitter. He can care without clinging. He can lose something he wanted without losing himself. And that is when you start realising that confidence isn't believing everyone will choose you. It's knowing you'll be okay even when they don't. Number 3, you can admit when you're wrong. This sounds quite simple, but pay attention to what happens the next time someone calls you out. Maybe you said something you shouldn't have. Maybe you handled a situation quite badly. Maybe you misunderstood what someone was trying to tell you. Your first instinct might be to defend yourself. You explain why you did it. You bring up something that they did. You start looking for a reason that makes your mistake seem less like a mistake. Because admitting you're wrong can feel like losing. But here's the problem. If you always need to be right, you're going to spend your life protecting your ego instead of improving yourself. So your ego gets in the way. A mature man can say, I got that wrong. He can say, I shouldn't have said that. He can apologise without adding 5 excuses afterward. And that doesn't make him weaker. It actually makes him secure enough to face the truth about himself. Because you can't grow if you're constantly defending the person you already are. Just think about it. If someone points out a flaw and your first reaction is to attack them, you've learned nothing. But if you can take a step back and think maybe they're actually right, now what you've created is an opportunity to become better. And this applies everywhere, in relationships, at work, with your friends, even with yourself. You don't need to become perfect. You just need to be honest enough to recognise when you're wrong. And once you stop seeing accountability as humiliation, something quite interesting happens. You become much harder to manipulate because you don't need to defend a fake version of yourself. You actually know who you are. You know you're going to make those mistakes and you know that you can correct them. That is confidence. Number 4, you don't react to everything anymore. Someone can make a disrespectful comment. Someone cuts you off in traffic. Someone leaves you on red. Someone criticises you. Someone says something about you that isn't even true. And the old version of you might have felt an immediate urge to respond. You need to defend yourself. You need to stand your ground. You need to explain yourself. You need to get that last word. But maturity creates something incredibly valuable between what happens and how you respond. You start asking, does this actually matter? Do I need to respond? Is this worth my energy? And sometimes the answer is no. Not because you're afraid to confront people, not because you're passive, but because you've learnt that every battle has a cost. You can stand up for yourself without turning everything into a fight. You can set a boundary without creating a scene. You can disagree with someone without needing to destroy them. And you can hear an insult without immediately proving that it doesn't affect you. That's the irony. The more secure you become, the less you need to react because you stop giving random people control over your emotional state. Someone can be angry, let them be angry. Someone can misunderstand you, let them. Someone can have a negative opinion of you. That's their opinion. You don't have to carry it around all day. And eventually what you'll realise is that something that feels almost like a superpower. Not everything deserves a response. Some things deserve a conversation. Some things deserve a boundary. And some things simply deserve to be ignored. Knowing the difference is maturity. Number 5, you stop chasing people who aren't choosing you. This is one of the hardest signs of maturity to develop because when you really want someone in your life, your instinct is often to try harder. You send out that other message, you make another plan, you explain yourself again, you give them another chance, and when they still don't respond the way you hoped, you start wondering. You start wondering, what else can I do? But sometimes the answer is nothing. Not because you don't care, but because you finally learned that connection can't be forced. Think about dating. If you're always the one initiating, always trying to keep the conversation alive, always wondering where you stand, eventually you have to stop looking at what someone might feel and start looking at what they're actually doing. Do they make time for you? Do they reach out? Do they seem genuinely happy to see you? Do they invest? Because interest doesn't have to be perfect. People get busy. People have bad weeks. Life happens. But when someone consistently makes you feel like you're trying to earn their attention, that's information. And maturity is learning to pay attention to that information. The same thing applies to friendships. You can care about someone and still stop chasing them. You can miss someone and still know the relationship isn't healthy. You can want someone in your life and still accept that they don't want the same thing. That is difficult. Because walking away doesn't always mean you stop caring. Sometimes it means you finally started caring about yourself too. A mature man doesn't beg people to choose him. He gives people the opportunity to meet them halfway. And if they don't, he accepts it. He doesn't need revenge. He doesn't need a dramatic goodbye. He simply stops forcing what isn't mutual. And that leads to something even more important. Number 6, you're comfortable being alone. Not lonely, but alone. There's a difference. Loneliness is wanting connection and not having it. Being alone is being comfortable enough with yourself that you don't need someone around every second. Maybe it's Friday night, your friends are busy, you're not dating anyone. There's no one texting you, so life can be quite boring for yourself. And instead of immediately reaching out for your phone, downloading another dating app, or finding someone just to fill the silence, you're okay. You make yourself dinner, you go to the gym, you work on something that you're building, you watch a movie, you read, or you just simply sit there and enjoy your own company. That might sound insignificant, but it's a huge, huge shift, because if you're terrified of being alone, you'll eventually start making bad decisions just to avoid it. You'll stay in relationships that you know aren't right. You'll tolerate disrespect. You'll chase people who aren't interested. You'll confuse attention with connection. But when you're genuinely comfortable alone, your standards change. You stop asking, who can I get to stay? And you start asking, who actually makes my life better? That's a completely different mindset to have, and you're no longer choosing people because you're afraid of being alone. You're choosing people because you genuinely want them there. And ironically, that's often when your relationships become healthier, because you're no longer asking another person to complete you. You're inviting them to share a life you've already learned how to enjoy. And that's another sign that usually appears once you start thinking this way. You stop making decisions based only on how you feel right now. You start thinking about where those decisions are taking you, and that's number 7. Number 7, you start thinking more about the long term. One of the biggest differences between an immature man and a mature man is the questions they ask themselves. An immature mindset asks, what do I feel like doing right now? A mature mindset starts asking, where is this going to take me? Because most bad decisions don't feel bad in the moment. Staying up until 3 a.m. feels good tonight. Spending money you don't have feels good today. Sending the angry message feels satisfying for about 30 seconds. Skipping the workout feels great when you're lying on the couch. But then tomorrow comes, and eventually those small decisions become patterns. You start realizing that your life isn't really shaped by the big decisions you make once in a while. It's shaped by the small decisions you repeat. What you eat, how you spend your money, who you spend your time around, what you do when nobody is watching, whether you keep the promises you make to yourself. This is where maturity starts to look less exciting. You become willing to sacrifice a little comfort today for a better life later. You save money instead of spending everything. You work on your body even when you don't feel motivated. You learn a skill instead of scrolling for another hour. You walk away from someone you know isn't good for you, and even though you still miss them. You're no longer obsessed with immediate gratification. You're thinking about the man you're going to be in 5 years' time. And here's the interesting part. You don't necessarily become more disciplined because you suddenly love discipline. You become more disciplined because you finally care enough about your future self, and you start thinking, what would the version of me 5 years from now wish I had done today? That question can change the way you live. And once you start thinking this way, another change usually follows. You stop needing to be the most impressive man in the room, because you realize that confidence doesn't require an audience. Number 8. You become confident without needing to make other people feel small. There's a version of confidence that is loud. You need everyone to know that you're in control. You dominate every conversation. You never admit that you're uncertain. You have an opinion about everything. And if someone challenges you, you immediately feel threatened. But real confidence is often much quieter. A confident man can say, I don't know. He can ask for help. He can admit that someone else is better than him at something. He can compliment another man without feeling like it makes him less valuable. He can let someone else have the spotlight, and he doesn't need to win every conversation because he's not constantly comparing himself to everyone around him. Think about how different that feels. You walk into a room and you don't need to impress anybody. You don't need to tell people how successful you are. You don't need to make jokes at someone else's expense to look funny. You don't need to be the loudest person there. You can simply be comfortable being yourself. That's a much deeper form of confidence, because when you genuinely trust yourself, you don't need to constantly demonstrate that you're confident. You don't need to dominate. You don't need to intimidate. You don't need to prove you're the man. You just become comfortable enough with yourself that other people's success does not threaten you. And that's when you realise something. You realise something important. You can be powerful without needing everyone else to feel powerless. But there's still one level beyond confidence. It's taking full responsibility for the life that you're building. And that is number 9. Number 9, you take responsibility for your life. You didn't choose every circumstance. You didn't choose how you were raised. You didn't even choose every person who hurt you. And sometimes life genuinely is not fair. But eventually there's a question every man has to answer. Regardless of how I got here, what am I going to do about it? That's where maturity begins, because it's easy to explain why your life isn't where you want it to be. Maybe your parents didn't give you the support you needed. Maybe your last relationship damaged your confidence. Maybe you were given fewer opportunities than somebody else. Maybe you've made mistakes that you're still paying for. Those things can be real, but if you spend the rest of your life using them as explanations for why you can't change, nothing's going to change. A mature man starts separating two things: what happened to me and what do I do next. You might not control what happened, but you can control what you do with it. It's like dealing with the cards that you've been dealt with. You can decide to get healthier. You can learn a skill. You can leave a destructive relationship. You can stop repeating the same mistake. You can ask for help. You can start again. And that's what taking responsibility really means. It doesn't mean blaming yourself for everything. It means refusing to give away your power over the things that you actually can control. So you stop wanting somebody to come and fix your life, and you start building it by yourself. But there's one final sign that, in my opinion, matters more than all of the others that I've explained, because you can become more disciplined, you can become more successful, you can become more confident, and still not like the person that you've become. Number 10, you genuinely respect the man that you're becoming. This is different from being impressed with yourself. You don't need to look in the mirror and think, I've made it. You just need to be able to look at your life and know you're moving in the right direction. Maybe you're not where you want to be yet. Maybe you still have weaknesses. Maybe you still get insecure. Maybe you still lose your temper sometimes. Maybe you still make decisions you regret. But that's okay. The question isn't, am I perfect? It's, am I becoming someone I respect? Do you keep your word? Do you take responsibility when you mess up? Can you walk away from people who don't respect you? Can you handle rejection without becoming bitter? Can you be alone without feeling like you're incomplete? Can you treat people well without needing something from them? Can you make difficult decisions today for the sake of a man that you'll become tomorrow? If the answer is increasingly yes, you're probably more mature than you realise. Because real maturity isn't becoming emotionless. It's not becoming cold. It's not pretending that you don't care. And it's definitely not becoming someone who thinks he's better than everybody else. It's becoming strong enough to care without losing yourself. Strong enough to admit when you're wrong. Strong enough to walk away. Strong enough to stay when something is worth fighting for. And it's being strong enough to accept that you still have work to do. Because becoming a better man isn't something you finish. There's no final level where you've suddenly figured everything out. You just keep learning. You keep correcting yourself. you keep becoming a little bit more disciplined, a little bit more patient, a little more honest, a little bit more grounded. And eventually you look back at the man that you used to be and realize that you don't even think the same way anymore. That is real growth. So if you recognize yourself in some of these signs, don't focus on becoming perfect. Focus on continuing in the right direction, because the goal, it's not to become a man who has nothing left to improve. The goal is to become a man you can genuinely respect. Subscribe for more videos like this.